At our divorce hearing, my wife boasted with a confidence that made the courtroom tense, her voice dripping with entitlement as she declared she would take every asset I had worked for, from my savings to my investments, from the houses we shared to the cars I had purchased with my own money, and she even went so far as to describe in vivid detail how she would spend it, outlining vacations, new purchases, and a lifestyle funded entirely by what she called my excess, as though the years of my hard work existed solely to serve her comfort, and the room seemed to lean in, captivated by her audacity, while I sat silently, folding my hands calmly in my lap, resisting the urge to interrupt, knowing that any emotional outburst could be twisted against me, and that my victory lay in patience, planning, and one small envelope tucked carefully in my briefcase, the result of months of preparation with my attorney, containing the legal documentation, account details, and evidence that would dismantle her assumptions completely. As she finished speaking, smirking triumphantly, the judge adjusted his glasses and asked if I wished to respond, and I nodded, reaching slowly for the envelope, savoring the quiet suspense that had settled in the room, and when I placed it gently on the bench, the sound of paper against polished wood seemed louder than I expected, drawing every eye in the courtroom toward me, including hers, which widened in disbelief as she realized that her plan to intimidate and overwhelm had overlooked the one fact she had never considered. I had anticipated her arrogance. I explained clearly and concisely that the envelope contained full documentation proving that the assets she claimed were not only protected legally, but also could not be divided in the way she imagined because of prior agreements, trusts, and irrevocable legal arrangements that I had set up precisely to safeguard what I had earned and to ensure fairness for all parties involved, especially in the unlikely event of a divorce. And I watched the smirk fade from her face, replaced by a flicker of panic as she realized that her boastful declarations now worked against her, and the judge carefully reviewed the documents, eyes scanning line by line, and the silence in the courtroom was palpable, broken only by the occasional shuffle of papers or the quiet gasp from an observer, as the power dynamic shifted dramatically in an instant. She opened her mouth to argue, to demand reconsideration, but the judge raised a hand, motioning for calm, and in a tone that carried both authority and surprise, he remarked that the documentation in front of him demonstrated that her expectations were legally impossible, and he asked if she wished to offer any clarification or challenge the validity of what was presented, and for the first time that day, she faltered, fumbling for words as the audience watched her unravel, the confidence that had dominated the hearing now crumbling into stunned silence, while I remained composed, allowing the law, not my anger or emotion, to speak on my behalf, and as the judge finished reviewing the envelope, he made a final statement, confirming that the assets were protected, that any attempt to claim them in the manner she had outlined would be invalid, and that the distribution would follow the arrangements that had been carefully documented long before the divorce was filed, and as the gavel came down, the reality settled over everyone in the room. The woman who had boasted so loudly was defeated, not through confrontation, but through preparation, foresight, and patience. My wife sat frozen, disbelief etched across her face, as I stood quietly, nodded to the judge, and gathered my things, understanding that true power often lies in calm, methodical planning rather than loud words or theatrics, and as I left the courtroom with the envelope still intact in my briefcase, I realized that I had not only preserved my fortune but also demonstrated a quiet, undeniable lesson about accountability, foresight, and the strength that comes from anticipating every move and never underestimating the consequences of arrogance. The day ended not with shouting or bitterness, but with the deep satisfaction of justice observed and the silent acknowledgement from everyone present that preparation, patience, and integrity will always outweigh bluster and entitlement, and that sometimes a single envelope can speak louder than 1,000 words, turning a boastful claim into an empty echo, leaving only the truth standing firm.